Dr. Eliza Chen's coffee cup vibrated across her desk, trembling toward the edge before she caught it. Another quantum fluctuation, the third this morning. She adjusted her spectral analyzer, convinced the increasing disturbances were more than standard background radiation. AIVA, run diagnostic sequence delta on the temporal field, she instructed her lab's eye. Commencing scan, Dr. Chen. The holographic assistant responded, its form shimmering in the center of the laboratory. Anomalous readings detected in. The air cracked like shattering glass. Before Eliza's eyes, the laboratory's eastern wall simply dissolved. Not collapsed, not exploded, dissolved, revealing an impossible scene beyond. A bustling Victorian London street stretched where downtown Berkeley should have been, complete with cobblestones slick with rain and the acrid smell of coal smoke. Steam-powered hovercrafts navigated between Gothic spires that had never existed in this timeline, their brass propellers gleaming in weak sunlight. AIVA, emergency protocols. Eliza shouted, backing away as the anomaly expanded. The AI's voice distorted, its holographic form exploding into shards of light. The fragments swirled, coalescing into something solid, a brass and copper automaton with glowing crystal eyes and intricate clockwork joints. "I do apologize for the inconvenience, madam," it announced in perfect Queen's English. "It appears we are experiencing a rather severe temporal displacement event." Eliza's neural interface pinged with emergency broadcasts from across the globe. Tokyo. 1950s atomic-powered robots marching down the Ginza. Dubai. Renaissance airships with glowing crystal engines docking at skyscrapers. Moscow. Mammoth-riding warriors from a timeline where the Ice Age never ended clashing with local authorities. Her phone rang. Director Hayes from DARPA. "Chen, are you seeing this?" His voice cracked with strain. "We've got timeline collapses all over the grid. The Pentagon is half quantum computing lab, half medieval fortress. We need containment protocols now." "Sir, conventional containment won't work. This isn't a localized event. It's happening everywhere simultaneously." She stepped cautiously toward the boundary where her lab met Victorian London, feeling resistance like pushing through gelatin. "Multiple timelines are collapsing into our present. We're deploying response teams with temporal stabilizers." "No," Eliza shouted. "Don't let them cross the boundaries." Too late. Her neural feed filled with tactical footage. Soldiers approaching a temporal boundary in Times Square, weapons ready. As they stepped through, their bodies blurred, aging decades in seconds before rejuvenating, their equipment transforming between futuristic and primitive versions. They screamed, caught in temporal flux. Eliza closed her eyes, calculating variables. On impulse, she reached out again, touching the boundary where her lab met Victorian London. The resistance remained, but instead of pushing blindly, she visualized passing through, imagining her molecular structure maintaining cohesion. Her hand passed through seamlessly. "Fascinating," the clockwork AIVA commented. "Your brainwave patterns appear to create localized temporal stability." 3 hours of frantic testing confirmed her theory. Human neural patterns could consciously navigate these overlapping realities without harm. Other species, from lab rats to the parakeet in the biology department, suffered immediate cellular degradation at temporal boundaries. As Eliza compiled her findings, the air shimmered again. A figure materialized beside her desk, humanoid but wrong somehow, with proportions suggesting evolution in slightly higher gravity. Its skin had a pearlescent quality, eyes too large and entirely black. "Dr. Eliza Chen," it said, voice resonating from multiple points simultaneously. "I am the curator. We have been observing your species for millennia, waiting for this moment." "What moment?" she asked, instinctively backing away. "The moment when humanity's unique temporal signature becomes necessary to the cosmic order." The being extended what approximated a hand. "The chronivores approach, Dr. Chen, and only humans can navigate the temporal labyrinths needed to stop them. I offer you a position of critical importance. temporal defense coordinator for this region of the multiverse. Outside, the sky fractured into a kaleidoscope of different atmospheres as reality itself began to unravel. 3 billion viewers and counting, Dr. Chen. The UN communications director adjusted Eliza's microphone. The world needs reassurance. Eliza nodded, gathering her thoughts as the red light blinked on. Her emergency broadcast had barely begun when the signal distorted, screens worldwide displaying interference patterns before cutting to orbital footage. A vessel appeared in Earth's atmosphere, a structure defying conventional geometry, its hull shifting between states of matter, as if reality itself couldn't decide what it was seeing. The craft descended toward the UN headquarters in New York, military interceptors passing harmlessly through its fluctuating form. "They're coming through a temporal corridor," Eliza explained to frantic security personnel as she rushed to the roof. Conventional weapons would phase right through them, or worse, ricochet through time. The craft hovered above the plaza, a shimmering door materializing in its side. The beings that emerged looked human, technically, but represented such diverse evolutionary paths they could have been different species entirely. A woman with moss-green skin stepped forward, photosynthetic patches pulsing with stored sunlight. Beside her floated a translucent figure composed of light and data, a human consciousness digitized and projected. Behind them came others, humans with subtle gill structures, humans with additional joints, humans with neural interfaces sprouting from their temples. "We are the Temporal Refugees Coalition," the plant-human hybrid announced, her voice carrying harmonics that triggered emotional responses in listeners. "Survivors from dozens of collapsed timelines. You are experiencing the first waves of a temporal cataclysm we've been fleeing for generations." The emergency summit convened within hours. Representatives from 50 nations faced the delegation from futures that would never exist now. Eliza watched tension build as military leaders eyed the visitors with suspicion. "How do we know you didn't cause this convergence?" demanded General Zhao of the Chinese military division, his hand resting on his sidearm. "Perhaps you're refugees because you destroyed your own timelines." "Our timelines were consumed," replied the digitized human, voice modulating through speakers, "by entities you'll soon encounter firsthand." Zhao drew his weapon suddenly, firing at the moss-skinned woman. The bullets passed through her harmlessly, striking the wall behind. Yet when Eliza reached out, her hand made contact with the visitor's arm. "Fascinating," the plant woman said, unperturbed by the attack. "You maintain phase alignment across temporal boundaries." Laboratory analysis revealed the truth. Non-human biological samples disintegrated when passing through temporal boundaries, while human DNA contained an inexplicable molecular structure, a chrono-resilient protein that maintained integrity across timelines. "We detected the same proteins in our evolutionary history," explained Vorna, the moss-skinned diplomat, as Eliza examined the results. "It's what allowed some of us to escape when the chronovores came." "Chronovores? Timeline predators," Vorna replied. "Vast crystalline entities that feed on temporal energy. They've consumed thousands of species' potential futures, but they consider human timelines a delicacy because of your developmental complexity." The Coalition's central communication hub activated unexpectedly, its quantum array pulsing with incoming data. The digitized human, who called himself Seven, expanded his projection to display the transmission. "This signal originates outside our light cone," he explained, the air filling with complex multidimensional models. "It's them. The chronovores have detected Earth's temporal convergence. They're altering course." The projection showed crystal structures larger than cities, moving through space-time like predators tracking scent. "How long?" Eliza asked. "At their current speed through the temporal medium. 72 hours until the first arrives." General Zhao, chastened by his earlier outburst, stepped forward. "Can they be fought? Can they be killed?" Vorna and Seven exchanged glances. "We've spent generations running," Seven replied. "But the temporal characteristics we're seeing in baseline humans from your era, particularly in Dr. Chen, suggest possibilities we never had. Kievorna nodded. You might not need to run. You might be the first species evolved enough to stand and fight. Outside the chamber windows, New York City flickered between architectural styles as temporal boundaries weakened further, the first tremors of an apocalypse 72 hours away. Temporal distortions intensify near the poles, Seven explained, his holographic form projecting navigational data within the transport craft. Antarctica shows the highest concentration of what we call time mirages. Eliza studied the readings, noting the chaotic patterns. 3 days after meeting the temporal refugees, she now led an expedition to the southernmost continent, accompanied by Kievorna, 7, and a multinational team of scientists and military personnel. Approaching the first boundary, announced Captain Adelaide Shaw, a Victorian aeronaut whose timeline had specialized in atmospheric sailing vessels. Her golden goggles reflected swirling aurora patterns as she navigated through increasingly unstable airspace. "Brace for transition," Eliza called out. The craft shuddered, reality outside the windows shifting like flipping pages in a book. Antarctic ice fields gave way to prehistoric jungle, then to futuristic research domes, then back to ice, all within seconds. Temporal navigation systems failing, Adelaide reported. Fighting the controls. Manual guidance only. Dr. Rashid, their quantum physicist, screamed as his body suddenly phased out of alignment, half of him shifting 2 seconds behind the rest. Before anyone could react, he vanished completely, erased from their timeline. Landing zone compromised, Adelaide shouted over the alarms. Alternate site 3 kilometers east. They touched down amid a temporal quake that claimed another team member, a Russian geologist who aged 80 years in seconds before crumbling to dust. The survivors donned specialized gear designed by the refugees to offer minimal temporal protection. The signal is strongest 2 miles beneath us, 7 indicated, projecting a 3-dimensional topographical map. 6 hours of treacherous drilling through ice that sometimes transformed into bedrock, sometimes into liquid, revealed something impossible. A pulsating crystalline structure the size of Manhattan, glowing with internal energies. This predates Earth's formation, Kievorna whispered, tracing alien symbols etched into its surface. It's a repository. For what? Eliza asked. Everything you could have been. An opening formed in the crystal, a passageway adjusting its dimensions to accommodate them. Inside, the structure opened into a vast chamber containing a crystalline network that pulsed with data streams. Neural interface detected, announced 7 as tendrils of light reached toward Eliza. It's selecting you. The light enveloped her, and Eliza's consciousness expanded. Images flooded her mind. Thousands of alien civilizations across the universe, their technological evolution following predictable mathematical patterns. Then came humanity. A chaotic, fractal development pattern, generating infinite timeline variations. I am the archive of possibilities. A voice resonated directly in her mind. I record every potential path for sentient species. The archive showed her humanity's statistical improbability. Civilizations that should have destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons, climate collapse, nanotechnology gone rogue, artificial intelligence uprising. Yet in timeline after timeline, humans persisted through what the archive designated as irrational persistence against mathematical certainty. Why show us this? Eliza asked aloud. Threat assessment, the archive responded. The approaching chronivores have consumed 317 species timelines completely. A terrifying simulation formed. Crystalline entities the size of moons, devouring entire planet histories, erasing not just worlds, but every potential version of those worlds across all timelines. They consider human timelines a delicacy because of their unique complexity. Your species generates more temporal energy through its chaotic development patterns than any other known civilization. The vision shifted to Earth, showing 7 massive chronivores approaching from different vectors in spacetime. First contact, 64 hours. As the neural connection released her, Elisa collapsed into Kivorna's arms, blood trickling from her nose. "I saw them," she gasped, "and I saw why they want us, why they'll never stop hunting us." "What did you see?" Adelaide asked, helping her to her feet. "Our chaotic nature, our unpredictability. It's not a weakness. It's the most valuable thing in the multiverse." Eliza wiped the blood from her face. "And we have 2 days to weaponize it." Manhattan dissolved into chaos as the first chronivore arrived. From her observation post atop the Chrysler Building, Eliza watched the entity materialize over New York Harbor, a crystalline structure larger than the island itself, facets refracting sunlight into prismatic beams that cut through reality wherever they touched. It didn't attack so much as simply consume, erasing blocks of the city from existence as it drifted northward. "Evacuation status," she demanded through her neural link. 30% complete, responded General Jao, coordinating from a command center in what remained of Midtown. "We need more time." "Time is exactly what we don't have," Eliza replied, watching the entity approach. "Prepare the countermeasure." Military jets screamed overhead, launching experimental temporal disruptors. The missiles struck the chronovore's crystalline surface, then rebounded through time, striking the same Manhattan locations across different eras simultaneously. Skyscrapers aged to dust in seconds, then reversed to construction sites, then vanished entirely. "Conventional weapons are worse than useless," Kivorna reported from the forward observation team. "They're creating temporal rifts that accelerate the entity's feeding process." Governments worldwide declared martial law as reports of 5 more chronivores entering the solar system flooded emergency channels. Refugees from collapsed timeline sections overwhelmed safe zones. Chaos threatened to unravel what remained of global coordination. "It's time," Eliza announced to the hastily assembled Coalition Council, 30 representatives from different human timeline variants, each contributing technologies that violated the other's physical laws. "Operation Paradox begins now." Captain Adelaide Shaw adjusted her brass goggles, studying the schematics for her modified airship. "These quantum torpedoes can't possibly interface with my vessel's steam propulsion." "That's exactly the point," Eliza explained. "The chronivores feed on logical, predictable timeline energy. The archive showed that they struggle to process contradictions, technologies that shouldn't work together. You're creating deliberate paradoxes," Seven realized, his holographic form brightening with understanding. "Precisely. Your timeline's quantum physics contradicts Victorian steam mechanics. By forcing them to function together through human operation, we create temporal dissonance the chronivores can't digest." 20 minutes later, Adelaide's airship, a brass and mahogany vessel trailing steam from ornate vents, rose above the Manhattan skyline. By all laws of aerodynamics in the current timeline, it should have crashed immediately. Yet with Adelaide at the helm, the impossible vessel soared directly toward the chronovore's crystalline heart. Approaching target, her voice crackled through the comms. "Quantum torpedoes armed. These mechanical interfaces you installed make no bloody sense, Dr. Chen." "They're not supposed to," Eliza replied. "Trust your instincts, not the instruments." The chronovore's surface rippled as it detected the approaching vessel, crystalline tendrils reaching outward to engulf the tiny airship. "Now, Captain." Adelaide activated the quantum torpedoes while simultaneously engaging her vessel's temporal displacement engine, a combination that created an enormous paradox at the point of impact. The resulting dissonance waves shattered a segment of the chronovore, sending crystalline fragments raining down over Staten Island. As recovery teams collected the fragments, Coalition scientists made a startling discovery under quantum microscopy. "The entity's tissue shows neural response patterns," reported Dr. Katri, her hands trembling as she examined the readings. "It reacts to emotional states, particularly confusion and unpredictability." "Human emotions confuse it?" Eliza asked. "More specifically, human decision-making." "Look at these patterns." The entity struggled to process Captain Shaw's navigational choices because they followed intuition rather than logical optimization. Elisa stared at the readings, a plan forming in her mind. Then we need to confuse it on a much larger scale. Outside, temporal rifts continued spreading across Manhattan as 6 more chronovores appeared on deep space sensors, their crystalline forms glittering like hungry stars against the darkness. Hidden beneath the Himalayas, in a bunker reinforced with temporal stabilizers, Eliza Chen stared at equations scrolling across multiple displays. Beside her, Ziv 427, a mathematician from a timeline where humans evolved 11-dimensional neural structures, manipulated variables with elongated fingers that seemed to bend in impossible directions. "This is our 37th attempt," Ziv said, voice resonating with harmonic undertones. "We're still missing something fundamental." Reality fluctuations intensified around them, lab equipment spontaneously transforming between abacuses and quantum computers as timeline convergences strengthened. Technicians worked in shifts, their consciousness overwhelmed after prolonged exposure to the fluctuations. Eliza rubbed her temples, exhaustion clouding her thoughts after 4 sleepless days. The chronovore's response to Captain Shaw's attack suggests emotional variables affect temporal stability, but we can't quantify the relationship. She input a new sequence, frustration making her careless. Digits transposed, a decimal misplaced, a critical error. Yet when the simulation ran, it produced a valid result. "Wait," she whispered, staring at the incongruity. "That's impossible. I made a mistake in the calculation, but the result is correct." Ziv 427's eyes widened, pupils expanding to eclipse the irises entirely. "Run it again. Deliberately introduce an error." 3 more tests confirmed it. Mathematical errors that should have invalidated the entire equation somehow produced correct results when processed through human neural patterns. "This defies rational explanation," Ziv muttered, rechecking the findings. "Exactly," Eliza exclaimed, suddenly energized. "That's it. Rational explanation. The archive showed us that human timelines are unique because they're unpredictable. We're blending logic with something else entirely." Working feverishly, they mapped the relationship between logical reasoning and another distinctly human trait, irrational hope, the capacity to believe in positive outcomes despite contradictory evidence. Their resulting equation of existence proved mathematically that human consciousness creates its own temporal field by simultaneously deploying logic and illogic, the equivalent of calculating precise odds while still believing you'll beat them. When they presented their findings to the Coalition Council, chaos erupted immediately. "This is absurd pseudoscience," argued the representative from a hyper-rationalist timeline where emotions had been genetically minimized. "You cannot seriously suggest that hope is a quantifiable variable in temporal mechanics. The evidence speaks for itself," countered a delegate from an intuition-evolved timeline, her neural extensions glowing with excitement. "Your dismissal proves the equation's premise. The tension between our approaches strengthens reality." Monitoring equipment confirmed it. The philosophical argument itself was generating a localized temporal stability field, reinforcing the boundaries between realities precisely where they clashed most intensely. "Don't you see?" Eliza interrupted, pointing to the readings. "Our disagreement about whether the equation works is making it work more effectively. The chronovores consume logical, predictable timeline progressions. Human consciousness defies prediction. We simultaneously calculate precise probabilities while believing in improbable outcomes." She projected her radical proposal. Instead of fighting timeline convergence, they would deliberately accelerate it through synchronized reality contradictions across 12 nexus points corresponding to Earth's ley lines. "You want to intensify the very catastrophe we're trying to prevent?" General Zhao asked incredulously. "Yes," Eliza confirmed, "but in a controlled manner that creates a temporal knot of such complexity that it becomes indigestible to the chronovores. Imagine trying to swallow a meal that constantly changes form between bite and throat." Seven's holographic form analyzed the simulation. The theoretical mathematics support this approach, But the practical implementation requires humans to maintain conscious function while experiencing multiple timeline versions simultaneously. The neural stress would be unprecedented. "We're already doing it," Eliza countered, gesturing around the room, where reality fluctuated continuously. "Humans are adapting to temporal instability faster than any species the archive has ever recorded. We need to leverage that ability before the remaining chronovores arrive." Outside, satellite imagery showed the wounded New York chronovore splitting into two smaller entities, both regenerating as they continued consuming reality block by block. 7 chronovores encircled Earth like massive crystalline predators, their faceted surfaces reflecting distorted images of the planet they prepared to consume. From the Coalition's Emergency Command Center beneath Geneva, Eliza monitored the final preparations for Operation Timewave. Accelerator teams in position at all 12 nexus points. 7 reported, his holographic form displaying status indicators from each site. Stonehenge team initiating primary sequence. The ancient stone circle in England, positioned precisely at the intersection of major temporal ley lines, now bristled with technology from a dozen different human timelines. As the accelerator activated, catastrophe struck immediately. A blinding column of energy erupted skyward, tearing reality apart in an expanding wave. Emergency feeds showed 27 versions of England merging simultaneously. London citizens screamed as they experienced existential vertigo, simultaneously existing as Victorian lamplighters, modern office workers, and post-singularity consciousness clusters. Historic buildings phased between architectural styles. Streets rearranged themselves according to different urban planning philosophies, and weather patterns from different eras created impossible meteorological conditions. "Shut it down," demanded General Zhao, watching in horror as temporal chaos spread across the European continent. "The human cost is too high." Eliza studied the readings, her hands trembling. "We can't stop now. The energy signature is precisely what we need to confuse the chronovores. Proceed with Tokyo activation." It was a gut-wrenching choice, gambling humanity's sanity against extinction. As the Japanese nexus point activated, something extraordinary happened that no simulation had predicted. Children in the Shibuya district began playing impromptu games that incorporated the reality shifts, treating temporal phasing as normal. They laughed as they jumped between timeline fragments, their young minds adapting with astonishing speed. Within hours, social media exploded with timeline navigation techniques spreading virally across continents, practical methods for functioning amid multiple realities simultaneously. "Humans are developing temporal intuition," Keyvorn observed with wonder. "They're adapting in real time." Monitoring equipment showed the circling chronovores attempting to consume the intensified energy, only to become entangled in contradictory human thought patterns. The massive entities slowed their approach, crystalline surfaces clouding with confusion. At the Brasilia activation site, disaster struck without warning. Religious extremists who believed the temporal convergence heralded an apocalypse breached security, detonating explosives that damaged the accelerator's containment systems. Uncontrolled temporal collapse threatened to unravel the entire operation, creating a cascading failure that would provide the chronovores easy access to Earth's timeline energy. "Containment failure spreading," 7 reported, estimating total systematic collapse in 8 minutes. "I can reach it," Captain Adelaide Shaw announced through static-filled comms. Her temporally enhanced airship was the only vessel capable of navigating the chaotic reality storm now engulfing South America. "It's a suicide mission," Eliza protested. "The temporal density there would tear apart any vessel." "Perhaps," Adelaide replied, her Victorian sensibilities evident in her calm tone. "But we rarely get to choose our finest hours, do we?" Before anyone could argue further, Shaw's vessel plunged into the collapsing reality zone, vanishing from sensors. The Coalition Command Center fell silent, all eyes on the destabilization readings from Brasilia. Minutes later, the readings miraculously stabilized. On surviving cameras, Adelaide's airship emerged from the temporal maelstrom, Or rather, 3 versions of her vessel emerged simultaneously, somehow piloted by the same woman existing across multiple timelines at once. "Containment reestablished," she reported, voice overlapping with echoes of itself, "though I appear to have picked up a few extra copies of my ship along the way." Seven's analysis confirmed the impossible. She's adapted to multi-timeline existence completely, maintaining conscious control across divergent realities through sheer force of will. As Operation Timeweave continued activating the remaining nexus points, humanity's temporal adaptation accelerated. People globally began developing abilities to navigate the increasingly fractured reality, further evidence of the species' unprecedented resilience. Meanwhile, the chronivores remained trapped in holding patterns, unable to process the deliberate contradictions humans were creating in the temporal landscape. 3 days after Operation Timeweave, Earth existed in precarious equilibrium. The chronivores remained trapped in temporal deadlock, unable to advance yet unwilling to retreat from the feast they could sense but not consume. Humans navigated an increasingly complex patchwork of overlapping realities, their adaptability exceeding all predictions. In a makeshift medical facility in what had once been Rome, now an architectural fusion of ancient Forum, Renaissance splendor, and quantum blast towers, Eliza fought to save Ziv 427's life. The mathematician had suffered catastrophic temporal displacement while calibrating the Mediterranean nexus point, his 11-dimensional neural structure fragmenting across multiple timelines. His consciousness is literally scattered across different versions of reality, explained Dr. Katri, monitoring equipment that struggled to process readings from a patient only partially present. Standard procedures are useless. Desperate, Eliza relied on intuition rather than protocol. Using experimental quantum microscopy developed by the Coalition, she examined Ziv's cellular structure at the subatomic level and made an astonishing discovery. "This can't be possible," she whispered, adjusting the equipment to confirm her findings. Human DNA contains molecular structures that exist simultaneously across all temporal dimensions. Further investigation revealed that each human cell functioned like a biological quantum computer, calculating infinite probability trees instantaneously. This human constant, a previously undetected pattern within DNA, explained their unique resilience to temporal distortions, but raised profound questions about evolutionary probability. When Eliza shared her findings with the Coalition Council, 7 performed mathematical analyses that confirmed the impossible. The statistical likelihood of such structures evolving naturally is effectively 0. "Then how did we get them?" asked Captain Shaw, who now experienced constant déjà vu from navigating multiple timelines simultaneously. Seeking answers, Eliza undertook a dangerous neural reconnection with the Antarctic archive, despite warnings that her brain might not survive a second direct interface. As the crystalline tendrils once again enveloped her consciousness, she experienced a visceral data transmission that transcended language. She saw humanity's true origin, not as native Earth species, but as genetic pioneers seeded across time by their own descendants from the end of time. The archive revealed humans evolved specifically as the universe's immune response to entropy acceleration caused by chronivores, beings from outside normal spacetime that fed on causality itself. Earth represented a crucial temporal nexus point where humans first developed the emotional complexity that made their timelines uniquely resistant to consumption. The closed temporal loop of self-preservation spanned billions of years, humans creating humans to eventually evolve into the beings that would create humans. When Eliza regained consciousness, blood streaming from her nose and ears, she found the Coalition fracturing around her. News of humanity's predetermined evolutionary role spread rapidly, creating deep philosophical divisions. "We reject this deterministic view of our existence," declared representatives from free will-oriented timelines. "Our choices are our own, not part of some cosmic immune system." "You're missing the elegance," countered delegates from cyclical time cultures. "We created ourselves through temporal engineering, the perfect self-sustaining loop." The ideological battle threatened to unravel their unified defense, just as the archive detected a massive temporal distortion approaching, a disruption orders of magnitude larger than anything previously recorded. The Chronivore Alpha, Keyvorna whispered in horror, analyzing the readings. The entity that has consumed entire galactic histories, sensing the unprecedented resistance to its offspring. Emergency alerts flooded command channels as temporal satellites recorded the approach of a continent-sized crystalline intelligence, moving through the fabric of space-time like a predator tracking wounded prey. As the coalition dissolved into factions, Eliza realized the crushing irony. Humanity's greatest threat might not be the approaching cosmic predator, but their own inability to accept their place in the universal order. The Chronivore Alpha arrived with apocalyptic grandeur. A continent-sized crystalline intelligence that had devoured thousands of civilizations' timelines, it entered Earth orbit and immediately shattered the moon into temporal fragments, pieces of lunar landscape existing across multiple eras simultaneously. As worldwide panic erupted, the fragile coalition collapsed entirely. Several human timeline representatives, led by hyper-rationalist factions, attempted a desperate peace offering. Their shuttlecraft approached the Alpha with white flags from a dozen eras, and were instantly consumed, their timelines erased as if they had never existed. In Cairo, now a dizzying blend of ancient pyramids, Ottoman minarets, and quantum architecture, Eliza worked frantically with Captain Shaw and remaining allies to implement their final gambit. The human constant gives us one last option, Eliza explained, displaying molecular models of the chrono-resilient protein in their DNA. If we can amplify it, we might generate a temporal dissonance field the Alpha can't process. The procedure required volunteers to undergo a dangerous enhancement that would amplify their chrono-resilient DNA, potentially fatal but capable of projecting massive temporal dissonance fields. "How many volunteers do you need?" asked Keyvorna. "Hundreds of thousands, ideally," Eliza admitted. "But we'll never get that many in time." As if in response, the Alpha began systematic consumption of Earth's timelines, starting with Australia. Sydney disappeared entirely, not destroyed but removed from existence altogether, leaving only a void where history itself had been erased. "I'll take the prototype," Eliza decided, reaching for the experimental compound. "If it works on me, we broadcast the procedure globally." "It's untested," Shaw protested. "The neural feedback could destroy you." "We're out of options," Eliza replied, injecting herself before anyone could stop her. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Her consciousness expanded exponentially, existing across all human timelines simultaneously. The immense neural feedback nearly destroyed her mind as she experienced countless versions of herself. Scientist, mother, criminal, saint, victim, hero, villain, every possible Eliza Chen across infinite realities. Through excruciating pain, she focused on a single thought: connect them all. What began as one woman's desperate act created a cascading effect through the human population worldwide, as billions of people momentarily experienced countless versions of themselves. This unprecedented temporal event, billions of humans simultaneously processing contradictory realities, created a consciousness wave that struck the Chronivore Alpha with the force of a supernova. The entity's crystalline structure vibrated, resonating with the dissonance field, until fracture lines appeared across its continent-sized body. Then, impossibly, it began to transform, its consumption mechanics reversing completely, becoming temporal stabilizers that strengthened reality instead of consuming it. 1 year later, Earth emerged transformed, a breathtaking synthesis of technologies and cultures from across infinite timelines. Cities blended ancient architecture with impossible future technologies, while societies merged ancient wisdom with post-singularity insight. The archive of possibilities, now accessible to authorized researchers, revealed humanity's next evolutionary phase: conscious guardians of the multiverse's timeline integrity. In what had once been Geneva but was now a shimmering metropolis of crystalline spires and hanging gardens, Eliza, forever altered by her connection to all human timelines, addressed the United Timeline Council. Her eyes now contained shifting galaxies, her voice resonating with the harmonics of multiple realities simultaneously. "We now understand our true purpose," she explained, projecting blueprints for a temporal defense network spanning all of space-time. "We are the multiverse's immune system, evolved specifically to maintain the integrity of reality itself." Captain Adelaide Shaw, now commanding a fleet of time ships staffed by humans from 100 different eras, smiled from her seat on the council. "Not bad for a species that nearly drove itself extinct dozens of times." "That was precisely the point," Eliza replied. "Our chaotic nature, our contradictions, our illogical persistence against mathematical certainty, these aren't flaws but essential features. Only humans, with our unique blend of scientific ingenuity, adaptability, and irrational determination, could build and maintain the temporal balance." As the Council rose to approve humanity's new mandate, Earth's orbit glittered with the transformed chronovores, once predators, now protectors, their crystalline forms refracting sunlight into prismatic patterns that strengthened the very reality they had once sought to devour.